The following morning, Tiffany's routine took a dark turn. She approached Kaylee's bed, reached out to touch her, and was met with a chilling realization. Kaylee was cold to the touch. Initially, Tiffany wondered if her daughter had simply been chilled by the night air or was merely asleep. In a heartbreaking revelation, Tiffany would soon come to understand the grim truth. Her daughter, Kaylee, was lifeless. On January 31st, 2011, just 2 years old, Kaylee was discovered unresponsive, cold, and blue. In that tragic moment, she was pronounced dead. In the wake of this tragedy, police brought Tiffany in for questioning. They sought to piece together the events leading to that fateful morning. The tension in the air was palpable as they prepared to listen to her audio interview, a crucial piece in the investigation. Tiffany explained her routine, detailing how her weeks unfolded. She worked Monday through Friday, and on Sunday nights, she meticulously organized the children's clothes for the week ahead. The kitchen table became a staging ground for their uniforms, a reflection of her dedication as a mother. That night, she had instructed the boys to go to bed, ensuring they were already asleep in their room. When asked about their bedtime, she recalled it was around 9:30. Tiffany had also guided Kaylee to her own room. In a moment of clarity, Tiffany remembered bringing Kaylee to her room. Contrary to what some might expect, Kaylee walked in on her own, a small detail that painted a portrait of a typical night, one that would soon spiral into unimaginable sorrow. Tiffany Mitchell recalled a seemingly normal evening as she settled her daughter, Kaylee Belle, in front of the television. She chose Dora, a familiar comfort for the 2-year-old. After about 30 minutes, Tiffany ventured to check on her. Kaylee was still engrossed in the movie, prompting Tiffany to gently pull the blanket closer around her little girl. At that moment, she noted that Kaylee was still awake. Tiffany recalled that Kaylee had seemed somewhat drowsy the night before, a detail that blurred the lines between innocence and impending tragedy. It was around 10 or 10:30 when she placed her daughter in bed, before retreating to her own room to prepare for work. Shortly after, Joseph, Tiffany's boyfriend, joined her. As Joseph settled in, Tiffany busied herself with a drink. Yet, concern gnawed at her, prompting her to check on Kaylee one last time before surrendering to sleep. She remembered that last visit, around 10:30. Kaylee was fine then. When Tiffany touched her, she felt her daughter roll over, a reassuring sign that everything was as it should be. Tiffany returned to her room, unaware of the horror that awaited her. Morning arrived and Tiffany woke at her usual time, 6:45. She moved to the boys' room, turning on the light and announcing that it was time for school. After helping them with their uniforms, she returned to her room to get dressed, oblivious to the impending tragedy. As she prepared to leave, she made her way back to Kaylee's room at approximately 6:50. It was a routine moment, one she had completed countless times before. But when she touched Kaylee, the horrifying truth struck her once more. Her daughter was cold, and despite Tiffany's desperate attempts to rouse her, Kaylee remained unresponsive. Tiffany's heart raced as she grappled with the reality of the situation. Normally, she would have scooped Kaylee up and taken her to her father's house. Instead, panic set in, and she laid Kaylee down on the floor, knowing deep down that something was dreadfully wrong. In a devastating moment, Tiffany Mitchell recounted the chilling experience of discovering her daughter. She had intended to carry Kaylee Belle out to the car while she slept. Yet, as she lifted her child, a wave of dread washed over her. Kaylee's body was cold, unsettlingly so. Tiffany laid her down gently on the floor, wrestling with the growing fear that something was terribly wrong. As she turned on the light to inspect Kaylee's face, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Their small living space left no room for comfort. Tiffany had to maneuver carefully. She had carried Kaylee from her room, which was adjacent to her own. Panic surged through her as she placed Kaylee on the floor. The chill radiating from her daughter was alarming, and in that moment, Tiffany cried out for Joe, urging him to wake up, insisting that something was amiss. Joe, her boyfriend, responded urgently, instructing her to call 911 immediately. As the call was made, he desperately followed the operator's instructions, but Tiffany, overwhelmed with panic, repeatedly pleaded for help. Her cries echoed in the room, a frantic plea that something must be done to save her daughter. In a frantic moment, Tiffany recalled how Craig had instructed her to call 911 immediately. Panic surged through her as they placed the call. While Craig tried to follow the operator's instructions, Tiffany's heart raced. She cried out in desperation, Come help me! Something's wrong with her! The investigator inquired if Kaylee had shown any signs of discoloration. Tiffany's voice trembled as she described her daughter's condition. Her eyes were open. They were open, she insisted. Kaylee's face felt cold, her arms lifeless, but her body bore some warmth. When Tiffany had reached her daughter, Kaylee was still in bed, buried under the covers. Tiffany recalled how Kaylee lay on her side, facing the window. In a desperate attempt to wake her, she pulled her out of bed, revealing the little one's left side. Yes, that's right, Tiffany confirmed, recalling her daughter's usual sleeping position. She had gently pulled the blanket down, ensuring it wasn't over Kaylee's face. The blanket rested up to her chin as Tiffany lifted her daughter under the arms, a mother's instinct fighting against the growing dread. It was in that harrowing moment that Tiffany Mitchell recognized something was terribly wrong. She had thought her daughter, Kaylee Belle, was simply asleep, but the truth was far more chilling. The little girl lay motionless, her eyes wide open. Her face was pale, and her lips were parched, a haunting sight that sent a shiver down Tiffany's spine. Tiffany recalled a time when her daughter had been healthy, with no significant health issues as a baby. Although doctors had once mentioned a heart murmur, they reassured her that Kaylee had grown out of it. Since then, Tiffany had not taken her for a checkup. Aside from that murmur, her daughter had been perfectly healthy and required no medications. As Tiffany began recounting the layout of their home, she noted that Kaylee's bedroom was located at the back of the house. When she entered the room and lifted her daughter, she found Kaylee rolled over, facing the window. The police investigator pressed her further, asking if the heat had been on in the house the previous night. Yes, Tiffany confirmed, recalling how she had set the thermostat to a comfortable 73 degrees. However, the night had turned restless. She had awakened in the early hours, feeling the oppressive heat in her own room. Overwhelmed, she had turned the system off, desperate for relief from the stifling warmth. Tiffany shared that her bedroom typically became the hottest in the house. She had closed the vent and turned off the heat around 5 o'clock or 5:10 that morning. Although she had awakened, she hadn't ventured into Kaylee's room. It wasn't time yet. Instead, she had gone to the bathroom to turn off the heat before climbing back into bed, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Tiffany tried to grasp the fleeting moments of sleep before work. The investigator pressed on, inquiring about the events of the previous day. Tiffany painted a picture of her weekend, narrating that she had gone shopping on Friday night and Saturday, while Kaylee had been with someone else. She had picked her daughter up on Sunday. Did you go to pick her up? The investigator asked. Tiffany clarified that it was Craig, Kaylee's biological father, who had brought her back. They had met at the house, and he returned Kaylee around 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Tiffany mentioned that she had her cell phone with her, talking briefly into it, but she hadn't taken Kaylee shopping that day. Rather, she had met Craig earlier. Craig brought her here. We met here, and he brought her back on Sunday at around 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I had my cell phone with me, and I talked to my phone for a little bit. I didn't take her shopping earlier in the day. I met him here earlier in the day. The atmosphere shifted as she recounted their shopping trips, the mundane routine now tinged with tension. Was her daughter with her during those outings? She hesitated, recalling multiple visits to stores like Kohl's, but sought clarity. Was her little girl by her side during those moments? In a moment of reflection, Tiffany Mitchell recounted that her daughter, Kaylee Belle, had not accompanied her to Kohl's on that fateful day. The two had ventured there together previously. When Craig brought Kaylee to Tiffany's home, they hadn't gone anywhere else since then. Tiffany paused, deep in thought, trying to piece together the timeline. She explained that she was dating Joseph and spent weekends at his house, returning to her own during the week. The routine was set. Sundays were typically reserved for settling in at home to prepare for the week ahead. Tiffany struggled to remember if they had picked Kaylee up that weekend, noting that there were 5 kids in total. However, she clarified that Joseph's other son was not with them during that time. She recalled that Kaylee had indeed been with her at Kohl's, nestled snugly in a stroller while Tiffany maneuvered through the aisles, selecting items for her daughter. Tiffany elaborated that during their time in the store they had split up. She took one of her sons while Joseph took his 2-year-old son along. After their shopping excursion, the group returned to Joseph's house before heading back to Tiffany's residence later that evening. As Tiffany recounted, they arrived home around 9 o'clock. It was then that she instructed the boys it was time for bed. even as they pleaded to stay up and watch television. Tiffany firmly told them they had to go to bed, beginning the routine of settling everyone down and preparing their belongings for school the next day. As for Kaylee, Tiffany described her daughter's activities, noting she was playing. But where? The children were amusing themselves in the living room, with Kaylee dashing around, pulling DVDs from shelves and engaging in playful antics. Tiffany had urged the boys to go to bed, and after some coaxing, she guided Kaylee towards her room as well. Kaylee made her way down the hall to her room, only to emerge once more. Tiffany gently reminded her that it was bedtime, before entering the room to close the door behind her. There was no indication that Kaylee was upset about going to bed. Tiffany noted that her daughter was happily engrossed in watching Dora the Explorer. Tiffany reassured the investigators that Kaylee's behavior had been perfectly normal the previous day. There were no complaints of illness or discomfort. When asked about Kaylee's supper, Tiffany recounted that she had eaten at Craig's house before they picked her up. There was a brief mention of ice cream cones from McDonald's, a sweet treat Tiffany had gotten for all the children, including Kaylee. The investigators sought clarity on when they had picked Kaylee up, to which Tiffany explained that Craig had brought Kaylee directly to her house. Questions continued to flow as they sought to confirm Tiffany's whereabouts. After Craig dropped Kaylee off, Tiffany and Joseph had gone back out shopping at Kohl's. Tiffany detailed how, during their time on Spring Hill with Desmond, they had returned to Joseph's house for a couple of hours before making the journey back home with the kids. Joseph had his son with him at his house and had intended to put him to bed before coming over to Tiffany's. It was a simple family evening that culminated with their return home around 9 o'clock. The investigators pressed on, inquiring if Kaylee had experienced any falls or accidents recently. Tiffany answered with an emphatic no, denying any recent car accidents or illnesses. Kaylee, she insisted, was perfectly fine, no medical issues to report. As Tiffany Mitchell recounted, when her daughter Kaylee Belle was just a baby, doctors diagnosed her with a heart murmur. They reassured her that Kaylee would outgrow it. Tiffany mentioned that her daughter had regular checkups with Dr. Zudi, the pediatrician who had been monitoring her health. Dr. Zudi's practice was conveniently located across from Spring Hill Regional Hospital, at a facility known as Pediatric Care. Tiffany explained that Kaylee had not been seriously ill for a long time, only experiencing minor sniffles and colds occasionally. In fact, she noted that it had been a month or two since Kaylee had even a minor cold. Tiffany assured that her daughter had never required hospitalization, simply dealing with the usual childhood ailments. Tiffany added that whenever Kaylee caught a cold, her father would take her to the doctor since she was often in Tiffany's care during the day. The investigator pressed on, asking what Kaylee had been wearing when she went to bed that night. Tiffany's face lit up with pride as she described the new outfit she had bought for Kaylee, a pink sweater adorned with a monkey, paired with white fleece pants that also featured playful monkeys. She had purchased the clothes just the previous day. Tiffany recalled putting the clothes on Kaylee, eager to see if they fit. She had also dressed her in new shoes, excited about the new hairbrush she had bought, which Kaylee insisted on using to wear her hair down before bed. Despite a brief moment of crying and screaming, Tiffany reassured the investigator that Kaylee was just being her usual self. She explained that while Kaylee occasionally cried at bedtime, it was typical behavior for a child her age. Kaylee would often kiss everyone goodnight before settling into sleep. The investigator inquired whether Kaylee had access to anything that could pose a danger to her health. Tiffany, dismissing the thought, expressed indifference, noting the prevalence of drug use and prescription pills among others. As the day drew to a close, she tucked her daughter in, planting soft kisses on her forehead before retreating into the quiet of the night. The unsettling question lingered. Could her daughter have accessed anything dangerous in those fleeting moments? Yet, as she pondered, it was clear. This wasn't a matter for the police. It was a personal concern, one that weighed heavily on her mind. She acknowledged the reality of drug use, the choices people made, and the effects it had on families. Yet, the thought gnawed at her. Could her daughter have ingested something harmful? With a sense of urgency, she insisted that her home was free of prescription medications. There were no chemicals within reach, as she kept such items stored high, away from curious little hands. Her older children, she noted, were responsible, but the fear of accidents lingered like a shadow in the back of her mind. Just settling into this new house, she had yet to unpack fully. The disarray mirrored her unsettled thoughts, a reflection of the chaos that accompanied her recent move. Her voice softened as she shared her timeline, having moved in mid-December. The lease had started on the 20th, and while her older kids were playful, they were never reckless with their little sister. In her heart, she believed they played gently, despite the rambunctious nature of siblings. She described her daughter as a little princess, innocent and unaware of her size, eager to engage with her brothers. They treated her tenderly, as if she were a delicate flower in a storm. Yet, deep down, she wished she could lift the veil of confusion that clouded the investigator's mind. Her daughter, despite her small stature, possessed a fierce spirit, believing she could match her brothers in play. But they were always careful, like a gentle breeze, ensuring her safety in their boisterous world. For Tiffany Mitchell, the timeline of her relationship with Joseph was clear. They had been friends for 3 to 4 months before transitioning into a romantic relationship that had lasted about 3 months. When asked about Joseph's character, Tiffany described him as a calm presence, stating, "He gets along just fine with all the kids." She appreciated his non-confrontational nature, which she found endearing. Tiffany elaborated on Joseph's parenting style, emphasizing his gentle approach. He refrained from raising his voice, never resorted to physical discipline, and instead encouraged the children to sit against the wall during timeouts without bending their knees. His methods, though strict, were rooted in a desire for discipline without conflict. With her own children, Tiffany found that they respected Joseph. She noted that they could easily enforce similar disciplinary measures, as the little ones responded well to timeouts. "My kids have never complained," she stated, recognizing the bond they had formed. However, she reflected on her choices as a parent, revealing a troubling incident from the past. "At one time, I spanked my son for calling 911, she confessed, acknowledging that this led to an investigation by the Department of Children and Families. "You can spank your children as a form of discipline, right?" she questioned, pondering the complexities of parental authority. Tiffany continued, recounting how, following that incident, she underwent classes mandated by the state. "I have not spanked my child, not once, since that day," she affirmed. It was a turning point in her approach to parenting, shaped by the scrutiny she faced. When pressed about the specifics of the investigations, Tiffany revealed, "Yes, DCF has been called on me 3 times. The first incident occurred during her pregnancy with Kaylee Belle, when she tested positive for marijuana. She completed the required classes, believing she had done all she could to rectify the situation. The second occurrence, she explained, happened shortly after Kaylee's birth when she was found with low levels of marijuana in her system due to a urinary tract infection. This prompted another investigation upon Kaylee's arrival into the world. Reflecting on the more recent troubles, Tiffany described a tense dynamic with Joseph's ex, Tina Frank. "She's been threatening us," Tiffany stated, her voice tinged with concern. Tina had recently been released from jail after losing custody of her 2-year-old son due to a serious incident. Tiffany painted a portrait of a complicated family situation. "I have just met him," she said of the child, "and I have been taking care of him, treating him like my own." Despite her efforts, she felt the shadow of Tina's harassment looming over their lives, through Facebook messages and other forms of contact. She recounted strange occurrences around Joseph's house, which added to her unease. "I suspect that she is the one who called on me," Tiffany asserted, believing that Tina's jealousy of her relationship with the child had motivated the accusations against her. What were the claims made against me? She wondered, the weight of uncertainty heavy in the air. Reflecting on her past, she recalled the first incident that cast a shadow over her pregnancy. When she carried her daughter, a routine test revealed traces of marijuana in her system. Though she completed the mandated classes, the second positive result haunted her, a ghost from her past that refused to fade away. The weight of her past bore down on her as she recounted the incident surrounding her daughter's birth. Battling a urinary tract infection, a test returned with troubling news. Low levels of marijuana were detected. This revelation triggered an investigation that loomed over her like a storm cloud. The echoes of that day reverberated in her mind as she reflected on subsequent challenges. A 1.5 years later, she found herself entangled in a new drama involving the mother of Joe's child, who posed a constant threat. Tina, Joe's ex, had just emerged from incarceration, having lost custody of her own child after a traumatic incident. The stakes were high, as Jo now held full custody, navigating the fallout of her past mistakes. Despite being new to the family, she endeavored to care for Joe's child, treating him with the love and kindness she felt he deserved. Yet the harassment from Tina was relentless. A digital siege through Facebook messages and phone calls, each one a reminder of the volatile situation. She couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in her gut. Strange occurrences around Joe's house only fueled her suspicions. She believed Tina was behind it all, attempting to undermine her presence in the child's life. What allegations had been directed at her, and what dark secrets lay in wait? In a tense moment, Tiffany Mitchell recounted the allegations against her. It was claimed that she smoked marijuana around her children. The call to authorities had come about 2 to 3 weeks prior, igniting an investigation that would soon unfold. The allegations were clear. Tiffany's boyfriend, Joseph, informed the Department of Children and Families that she had previously threatened to report him and Tiffany, all in an attempt to create discord. Joseph's assertion was that there was nothing else of concern. Under scrutiny, Tiffany insisted that there had been no allegations of abuse or neglect aimed at her or her children. When questioned about her drug use, Tiffany was adamant. She denied any use of hard drugs, admitting only to smoking marijuana, which she claimed did not pose a threat to her children. With a determined tone, she assured the interviewer that no meth or fentanyl would be found in her home. She was clear that she only smoked marijuana, and if they were to visit, she would have nothing to hide. Tiffany emphasized her love for her children, stating that there was only a small quantity of marijuana in her house. She wanted her passion for motherhood to be understood, urging the investigators not to worry. The interviewer probed further, questioning whether Tiffany allowed her children to be around her while she smoked. She quickly clarified that she only smoked when they were not present, insisting it was not a frequent habit. Tiffany maintained that she smoked outside, arguing that marijuana would not harm her children if consumed in a manner that was not reckless. She sought to reassure the interviewer, asking if there were any other complaints to address. The conversation shifted as Tiffany was asked about any signs of physical harm that could raise concerns. She swiftly defended Joseph, asserting that he had never laid a hand on the children, insisting that his marijuana use was inconsequential. In her eyes, Joseph's marijuana use was being exaggerated. She expressed her concerns as a mother, particularly about the dangers of chemicals in the home, especially with 3 children often left in her care. As a proactive parent, Tiffany highlighted her commitment to learning. She had recently completed a 6-month parenting course, eager to acquire valuable skills to safeguard her children. The interviewer inquired whether the Department of Children and Families had mandated this course. Tiffany replied that it was voluntary, taken after a previous incident, revealing her desire to improve. She shared her journey through parenting classes, noting that they were recommended after her first encounter with authorities. Despite her initial resistance, she acknowledged the lessons learned. Reflecting on her experience, Tiffany felt that anyone could benefit from such classes. Although she had felt attacked at first, she ultimately appreciated the knowledge she gained. When asked about her daughter's health, Tiffany mentioned that Joseph had taken her for vaccinations recently. While the exact date was unclear, she estimated it was within the past 2 to 3 months. As the investigation continued, Tiffany was aware that she would need to cooperate fully. She expressed a willingness to work together with authorities, determined to navigate the challenges ahead as a united front. In a compassionate tone, the investigator assured her that this would be a collaborative process. They would navigate the complexities together, forming a team to unravel the tangled web of circumstances surrounding her life. In a moment of vulnerability, the interviewer acknowledged the emotional strain of the situation. Understanding the turmoil, he reassured her that expressing frustration was acceptable. He stood ready to support her through the unfolding tragedy. He offered her a lifeline, encouraging her to ask for anything she might need. He recognized her desire to be with her family during such a critical time and promised to keep the conversation brief, suggesting they could reconnect later. "Will they take her soon?" she inquired, her voice trembling with fear. The response was measured, revealing that it would take some time. "What will happen to her?" He explained that the child would be taken to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy, a necessary step before any funeral arrangements could be made. He informed her that once the examination was complete, the medical examiner's office would reach out to discuss the next steps. "Do you have any questions you would like to ask me?" he prompted gently, aware that her world had just shattered. As the conversation drew to a close, he offered her a chance to be with her family. "I wish I could do something more for you," he expressed sincerely. "Thank you, sir," she replied, but he insisted, "Please don't call me sir. Just call me Cole, okay?" "Thank you, Cole," she replied, her gratitude laced with sorrow. "Ma'am, I will conclude this interview at 8:46, he stated, marking the end of their formal discussion. He promised to share the full police report and provide additional details about the tragic events that had transpired. He offered her the opportunity to voice her thoughts afterward. The gravity of the situation came to light on January 31st, 2011, when police responded to a distress call regarding a death investigation. A 2-year-old child had been found unresponsive by her mother, and the chilling scene unfolded as the mother discovered her daughter's lifeless form, her arms and feet icy to the touch. The investigation revealed a single-wide mobile home on the south side of Ferry Avenue. This humble dwelling had its front yard facing east, with the ends running north and south. The officers noted a vehicle parked in the front yard, seemingly ordinary in the unfolding tragedy. Upon arrival, the police found the mother's boyfriend engaged in a desperate attempt at CPR on the child, while Tiffany, the mother, stood nearby, engulfed in panic. The child lay in the master bedroom, located at the south end of the residence, a place that should have been filled with laughter and play. Despite the boyfriend's efforts, the ambulance crew reported that the child was already deceased upon their arrival. She lay under a blanket, the warmth of life stripped away. The scene was somber as everyone exited, leaving behind the remnants of shattered lives. Only Tiffany and her boyfriend had been present when the child was found. Then, Craig, the biological father, arrived at the scene, fraught with concern. He spoke with the police, confirming his role as the child's father, yet admitted he had not been there that morning. His heart raced as he listened to Tiffany's frantic call, one that would forever alter their lives. Tiffany's voice had been filled with panic as she informed Craig that something was wrong with their child. Overcome with worry, he rushed to her side. The custody arrangement they shared allowed Tiffany to take the child to Craig's house during the day while she worked, a routine that had now turned into a nightmare. Craig recounted the days leading up to that fateful morning, recalling how Tiffany had brought their daughter to his home just days before. She had arrived around 6:30 that morning, remaining there until Sunday. In those days, the child had seemed fine, her spirit vibrant and alive. Craig described her as active, with a healthy appetite and no signs of distress. They played together, laughter echoing in the air. While he recalled a fleeting complaint of a stomachache, it had quickly dissipated, leaving no hint of the tragedy that awaited them. Tiffany explained that her daughter had complained of a stomachache, a minor ailment she attributed to overeating. An hour later, the discomfort seemed to dissipate, leading Tiffany to believe there was nothing seriously wrong with her child. It was then that the police sought her account while at the scene. She described how she woke early that morning to rouse her 2 sons for school. After preparing herself for work, she ventured to her daughter's room to wake her, intending to drop the child off at Craig's house before the school run. When Tiffany approached the bed, however, something was terribly amiss. Her daughter felt cold to the touch, her face and arms lifeless, her eyes staring wide open into the void. Panic surged through Tiffany as she carried her daughter to her bedroom, seeking more space to respond. Awakening her boyfriend, they desperately attempted to administer CPR while dialing 911. But as the police delved deeper into the circumstances surrounding the incident, they unearthed a troubling history. Tiffany and her children had previously been subjects of 3 separate DCF investigations. A twist that seemed all too familiar in true crime narratives, the involvement of DCF raised eyebrows. Tiffany revealed that one investigation stemmed from her testing positive for marijuana at the time of her child's birth. The second investigation had been triggered by allegations of her administering a spanking to her child. The third, occurring just weeks before this tragic day, followed a report claiming Tiffany had been smoking marijuana around her children. She suspected jealousy on the part of her boyfriend's ex, who she believed filed the complaint. In a moment of defiance, Tiffany insisted to the police, "I never smoke around my children." When pressed about possible narcotic use, she firmly denied any involvement. The police continued their questioning, inquiring whether she was prescribed any narcotics, to which she replied no. The inquiry turned to the household environment. Officers asked if there were any chemicals within reach of the children. Tiffany acknowledged the presence of some pills, but assured them they were stored high in cupboards, far from the children's reach. The police were baffled by the discovery. The child, lifeless, bore no bruises, cuts, or visible injuries. Yet a disturbing detail caught their attention. Foam was present around her mouth. This revelation prompted investigators to dig deeper into the background of Tiffany Mitchell's boyfriend, Joseph. Upon investigation, Joseph's history revealed 2 prior abuse reports from 2009. The first report was alarming, indicating that Tiffany's mother, Tina Frank, had tested positive for methadone, opiates, and benzodiazepines at the time of the child's birth. However, all these substances were later confirmed to be prescribed medications. The second report from that same year detailed an incident where the child had reportedly fallen off an examining table at the pediatrician's office. These 2 cases were the only records the police could find regarding Joseph. As the pieces of the puzzle began to connect, one couldn't help but wonder, was a pattern starting to emerge? Foam found at the child's mouth hinted at the presence of certain drugs. However, the investigation continued to unfold, revealing more layers to this tragic story. Tiffany recounted the events of Sunday, January 30th, a day that would change everything. On a fateful day, Tiffany Mitchell visited her grandmother's house, where she picked up her 2 sons. While there, she made a troubling purchase, acquiring an oxycodone pill for $15. Describing it as green, round, and 80 milligrams, Tiffany tucked the pill away in her wallet, unaware of the tragic events that would soon unfold. The pill remained in her possession until she returned home, where she retrieved it and placed it on the side of her nightstand. As the evening progressed, Tiffany put her child to bed and then stepped into the shower, momentarily leaving her daughter unsupervised. In a haunting twist of fate, Tiffany believed her child had awakened, ventured into the room, and taken the pill while she was in the shower. It was only after emerging from the shower that Tiffany noticed the pill was gone, prompting a frantic search that yielded no results. Initially, Tiffany claimed that her grandmother had given her the pill to ease menstrual cramps, asserting that it had mysteriously vanished from her wallet. However, under scrutiny, her narrative began to unravel, as she changed her story multiple times. Confronted with inconsistencies, Tiffany finally admitted that her boyfriend had a prescription for Roxy's, a term referring to a potent form of oxycodone. She revealed that she had secured the pill from her grandmother because her boyfriend had run out of his supply. Moreover, Tiffany disclosed a troubling history of prescription drug abuse, including crushing and snorting oxycodone pills. Deeply troubled, she expressed a sense of responsibility for her daughter's death, acknowledging that she had brought the oxycodone into their home. In a tragic sequence of events, while Tiffany took her shower, her daughter, Kaylee Belle, had woken up, taken the oxycodone pill, and succumbed to its lethal effects by morning. The haunting question remained: was Tiffany culpable? She was ultimately sentenced to 30 months in prison. Released in 2016, Tiffany faced charges of negligent manslaughter, a fitting term for the situation. 30 months seemed a paltry punishment for such a grievous outcome, yet many pondered the implications of her actions and circumstances surrounding them. It was clear that Tiffany had not intended for this tragedy to occur. Even in the review of past DCF cases, the focus had never been on any physical harm but rather on her substance use. Opinions varied, especially regarding drug use, but the consequences remained devastating. As reflections on Kaylee's case emerged, another Florida toddler's tragic fate came to light. This little girl, too, lost her life under senseless circumstances, and the police pointed fingers at her mother. The parallels to the Casey Anthony case were striking, and Tiffany Mitchell's initial instinct to deceive was noted. When questioned about her daughter's untimely death, Tiffany's response echoed familiar patterns. Authorities soon discovered that she had initially claimed ignorance regarding how her daughter had obtained the drugs. Nevertheless, Tiffany's narrative shifted, revealing that she had indeed left the drugs on her nightstand. Turning to Tiffany Mitchell's attorney, Jimmy Brown, the weight of this case hung heavily in the air. As he joined the discussion, news broke that his client had just been released on bail, adding another layer to this already complex and heartbreaking narrative. Initially, Tiffany Mitchell, the mother, insisted she had no knowledge of how her son, Kayy, came into possession of the drugs. However, as the investigation unfolded, authorities revealed that Tiffany Mitchell has since altered her account, now acknowledging that she left the drugs on her nightstand. In a significant development, we turn to Tiffany Mitchell's attorney, Jimmy Brown, who confirmed that his client has been released on bail. He expressed gratitude for the opportunity to speak on this evolving case. In a startling development, news broke of a bail hearing that took place early this morning at 8:15. The young woman at the center of the storm, Tiffany Mitchell, had just been released from Hernando County Jail. A reporter struggled to capture the gravity of the situation, urging the attorney to speak up. The eerie parallels drawn between this case and the infamous Casey Anthony trial were impossible to ignore. Both cases featured attractive young mothers in their 20s, each with a child around the age of 2. Both mothers initially misled law enforcement, and each case bore the grim suggestion of an accident. In the Anthony case, the tragic incident was framed variously as an accidental drowning or a chloroform overdose. In the current case, the substance in question was oxycodone, often dubbed hillbilly heroin. The reporter pressed the attorney for a response. Did he see any resemblance between the cases? Even the names carried a chilling similarity. Kaylee, the deceased child in the Anthony trial, and Kaylin, Tiffany's child. With measured deliberation, the attorney acknowledged the superficial parallels. Yes, the names were indeed reminiscent. The ages of both children echoed one another. The mothers, too, were in comparable stages of life. He pointed out that the allegations faced by Tiffany Mitchell bore striking resemblance to those levied against Casey Anthony regarding culpable negligence and aggravated manslaughter of a child. The underlying theory suggested that both mothers might have acted out of neglect, driven by a desire for personal gratification or perhaps the convenience of their circumstances. As the interview continued, the reporter struggled to hear the attorney, who seemed to be fading into the background amidst the weight of the accusations that loomed large in the air. "Yes, that's correct," Jimmy Brown responded, but there was a noticeable strain in his voice as he struggled to hear the questions being posed to him.